Today, the Ponderay Bay Trail stretches from Sandpoint for approximately 1.5 miles along the lakeshore, providing precious waterfront access to the public. The trail is a beautiful out and back route that ends at a gate marked private property. Beyond this is Black Rock.
So this vision has been around for a long time, and we feel like we're getting really close to achieving one of our milestones, which is connecting, the trail from Sandpoint to Ponderay.
We have some hurdles to cross to make it happen, including cleaning up toxic soils around Black Rock, the former Panhandle Smelting and Refining Company, and purchasing privately held property. The good news is we have the funding to do this. Before we move forward, we want to answer the following question. How do we do it in a way that preserves our connection to the past, our natural environment, and becomes something our community can be proud of for generations to come?
One of the things that I see happening in a growing region is we're at risk of losing access to things like waterfront. And that's where, when I look at our 2 miles of shoreline in Ponderay, you can think about it, that could be 20 home sites with private frontages, which is great. But it could also be 2 miles of public shoreline that 2,000 people all have access to.
We'll cross the tracks, and this is the only access, and technically we're illegal, to cross the tracks. But we're going to do it, and we're going to go on the site.
We put a camera up in a tree over a 2-week period last summer, and we got several hundred people just within a couple weeks who were crossing the railroad tracks, and they're carrying kayaks and coolers and fishing poles and bikes. They've got kids, they've got dogs, and that just reinforced again to us the need for safe public access.
The Panhandle Smelting and Refining Company was developed in 1904 and operated sporadically from 1907 to 1909. In 1922, the plant was dismantled and all salvageable materials were scrapped. All that remains today are crumbling foundation, brick piles, ore and waste piles, and a slag heap known as Black Rock. The ground in and around the site is dangerously high in lead and arsenic levels. Residents and visitors who access the lakefront from the City of Ponderay risk their health and safety when they illegally cross the railroad tracks and walk and play on highly contaminated soils. In its short operational history, the smelter's impact was lasting.
So in 2008 we did the assessment grant, and that lasted for 3 years. Started actually up in May of 2009, and we finished doing this assessment work here in November and December of 2011. But we were able to quantify this site extensively. This is, like I say, this is 12,000 parts per million lead right here. So that's hotter than anything we have in the Silver Valley, which is a huge cleanup. There was a large area right in here, and this is one of the more contaminated areas. We actually still have signs that we've placed on site for the last 8 years that have warnings, and there's a well back there too. We've looked at the groundwater, we've looked at things like this. But this area has very sparse vegetation because we're at about nearly 20,000 parts per million lead. So it's very hard for plants to uptake lead. It's a heavy metal. So it's again a very kind of dangerous area.
And a lot of the people who are going there are kids, and unaccompanied by adults even. And I have a feeling they're not really reading the signs or paying attention to it. And maybe they're minimizing what the risk is to themselves.
This really gives you an idea of how that smelter slag, it would come out molten and 3,000 degrees on little rail lines, and they would pour it, and you can see how this was liquid and molten, and it came over. I grew up in Sandpoint as a kid, and I remember coming out here 12, 13 years old, and we didn't even know what this was, and we always thought it was like a volcano or something. But it just has that look of almost being natural, like a volcanic type of activity, just because of the heat and the way it moved in such a fluid fluid way, and it resembles a basalt type of flow.
Well, we need to clean it up through this messy front yard project that in the end is going to create a beautiful, safe place for people to enjoy the lake and to be able to get back and forth between Sandpoint and Ponderay and Kootenai, along the shoreline, instead of having to battle traffic through the city.
We have the opportunity to do something great for our 3 communities. If we sit by and do nothing, we risk the health and safety of our residents. On the other hand, if we engage in a collaborative cleanup effort, we engage in our community's legacy. Stay tuned for public input workshops and the opportunity to share your feedback. It's up to each of us to decide what our front yard could look like.
That waterfront space as a public space and a public asset really brings value into the community, and it's lasting value for perpetuity. And that's one of the things that I hope we can do here.